Hey friends, welcome back to Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life. I'm your host, Natalie Payton Newman. Today I'm sitting down with Fred Schmidt, immigrant kid turned builder of big ideas across media, tech, and Austin's creative scene. We get into how luck really works, why ethics and chemistry beat hype, and how to trade screen time for real-world skills. If you're Gen Z and wondering when to start or when to pivot, this one is packed with practical wisdom and a great forklift story. All right, let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome to Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life. I'm Natalie Payton Newman. I'm an actor, comedian, and podcast person, Natalie. And I'm so excited to be here today with Fred Schmidt, a mentor of mine and a business owner here in Austin, Texas, as well as a international businessman and mentor to many, many people. Thank you for being here, Fred.
Well, thanks for the invite, Natalie.
Yes. So what we like to do on the show is start at the beginning. We don't have to go way, way back, but I do want the audience to hear a little bit about your immigration story and coming here to America and how you got your feet wet and learned the language, and what was that like for you? Or what? Just walk us through it.
Okay. Well, so you got to go back to the Cold War.
Okay.
I mean, that's where it all started. And so my single mother and I was a child, were living in Poland. That's where I was born. And it was under Soviet occupation. At that point, it had been 10 years that the Soviets had occupied Poland after the Second World War. And so my mother stayed until both of her parents passed away. And then, after another couple of years, she looked around and said, I don't think things are going to change here for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty grim and sad. And she came from a very illustrious family background. Her father, my grandfather, was a Polish scientist and accomplished a lot of things in Germany and Europe and ultimately around the world. But during the war, he got caught between the Germans and the Poles and the Soviets, and ended up at the end completely dying in obscurity and penniless, and his honorary degree ripped away from him, and everything else. It was a pretty tragic ending to his illustrious life. And so my mother said, let's get out of here. There's got to be a better life. Her sister was already living in the United States. And so she petitioned and was granted the opportunity to come visit Canada. And so she took me and we headed to Canada, where we had some family relations. And once we were in Canada, we petitioned the United States for political asylum. And that was granted by Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president at that time.
Didn't Mimi Eisenhower write a letter for you all?
Well, it went from my aunt, who was already living in Detroit, to the wife of the governor of Michigan, who happened to be friends with Mimi Eisenhower.
Wow.
So it was kind of a roundabout connection. And all that came about because my grandfather, in his heyday, was friends with Henry Ford. And Henry Ford had offered him a job to come to the United States to head up research for Ford Motor Company. And at the same time, the president of Poland was free between the First and Second World Wars for 20 years. It was a second republic of Poland where it had freedom from prior German occupation under the Prussian era and before the Soviet era. And so during that time, Poland was kind of finding its own way again as a free country. And so the president of Poland, who was a scientist also, called my grandfather. I don't think he called. I don't think they had phones, wrote him a letter or something, sent him a
telegram,
carrier pigeon, and asked him if he would come back to Poland and head up science at the Warsaw Polytechnic University. And so he said, I have enough fame and fortune. It's a nice offer from Henry Ford, but I think my country needs me more. I'm going to go back to Poland. And so he did that, and everything was great for a while until it wasn't, when the war came. And, the rest became sad history. So anyway, my mother and I ended up in Detroit eventually. I only spoke Polish until I was 8 years old. And the most interesting aspect of that period is because it was in the Cold War, all of the neighborhood kids thought we were Russian. Okay.
Really?
Well, because the Polish accent, Eastern
Sure.
European accents,
Sure.
Slavic accents all sound kind of Russian.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And so I was beat up constantly as a
Oh,
kid because all of the neighboring families disliked our family because they thought we were Russian.
right.
When in fact, it was hard for us to communicate that no, we're here to escape the Russians and Soviet occupation of Poland. And so the kids that beat me up, interestingly, in Detroit were not black kids or Hispanic kids. They were my friends because they had their own similar kinds of problems. It was white on white
Wow.
discrimination. And so it was Italian kids, German kids, Irish families. It was just tough blue collar
Sure.
existence. And so that gets you toughened up in a hurry as a
I
kid.
bet.
And so I, as quickly as possible, tried to forget my Polish language, forget that backstory of my life,
Mhm.
and assimilate, like all immigrants,
Right.
assimilate into the new country where you are now living. And so I still had a terrible, you know, Polish accent all the way until I was like 13 years old. And I continued to have these challenges with kids, and I was
Kids.
now getting into high school, and it was getting worse. And so my mother had this brilliant idea to get rid of my Polish accent, and she was watching, late night television one day, and some infomercial came on for Columbia School of Broadcast Arts, and she goes, I'm going to send you to this broadcasting school so that you can get rid of your Polish accent by learning American dialect, U.S. diction.
What
And
a
so for
legend.
over 2 years, I studied broadcast elocution to sound like a radio broadcaster. Okay, and so the long story of that, or the short story of that, is I credit kind of my entire career direction eventually to my immigrant upbringing and my Polish accent, and the residual accent that was still detectable when I spoke, and getting rid of that. Now, meanwhile, this was in my teenage years, while my mother remarried in this country, and my stepfather had passed away, and so I became head of household at the age of 14.
Oh my god.
My mother never learned to drive, so I taught myself how to drive when I was 14 because there was a car in the driveway, and
Red.
so I drove for 2 years without a license. By the time I took driver's ed, the teacher loved his time with me in the car because he's going, I
I
just can
don't
relax. You know what you're doing. Just keep both hands on the wheel. And
Right.
I'd be driving along, my hand out the window.
Oh my
And so,
gosh.
so I was working in factories during that time because that's what we did in Detroit.
Like
So
what type of factories?
like
Car fac
auto
auto
factories,
okay.
yeah, yeah. On the line for some parts supplier, and then eventually I was a part of the Chrysler team. So as a teenager, I was a member of the United Auto Workers, United Steel Workers, and the Teamsters in different jobs I had in different factories, and
Because
so
you were the head of the household and you had to
because I
provide
had
for the
to
family.
earn some money. My mother
Right.
never worked. Okay, she
Because she was
she
raised with
with wealth and
wealth.
fortune, and then the
Right.
war, and then nothing. And so there was nobody else, from my father, she had a small pension, a little bit of
Sure.
Social Security, but in the meantime, I had a younger brother and sister, and so, there was no insufficient income in the household, so I just started working. I got night jobs. I went to school by day, got night jobs in factories, which paid really well. Um,
And you were a part
and
of 3 unions
yeah,
as
yeah,
like a
yeah. Well, and I was
16-year-old.
growing my hair really long at this time, which helped me lie about my age, because you had to be like, I think 17 or 18, and I was like 15 when I started working in factories for the money. And so my last factory job, I was pressing bumpers, okay,
Okay.
for Chrysler. And what that is like this thing called a press, okay, which is a giant piece of equipment. And you pick up this big piece of steel. If you imagine a bumper, if it was flat,
Okay.
A bumper of a
Sure.
car like they used to be, made out of steel and chrome. Now they're all plastic.
Plastic.
But it was steel, and you would put this piece of steel into the press,
Okay.
flat. And then you would push two buttons, and the big press would come down and basically and crunch out a bumper. And then
Okay.
you reached in, you picked up the bumper, and you put it in a basket, and a forklift would drive it away. Well, one day I was sitting there pressing my bumpers, and I reached in to get the finished product, and the die in the press had not been set correctly, and it came loose. Now this thing, just half of it that was up in the air, the bottom half, it's
A mold.
it's a mold,
Yeah.
exactly. It was not set correctly, and this thing weighs about like a motorcycle. It's like 500-600 pounds, and it came crashing down with my hands in the thing, reaching for the bumper.
No.
And I just reacted in time, pulled my hands out, but the tips of my gloves got stuck in the die. Okay, so I came like a millimeter away from losing both of my hands in that accident. And I was so freaked out that I punched out of, we had time clocks at that
That's it.
time.
Yeah.
I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I've got a brain. I'm going to go do something else in my life. I'm going to the other side of the tracks, out of the blue collar world. I'm going to the white collar world.
Yes.
And I walked out of the factory, and, an hour later when I calmed down, I'm going, I don't have a job anymore. What am I going to do for income, for money? I got, my mother and brother and sister to take care of. And then I thought, I learned how to speak like a radio broadcaster.
That's right.
And so I had a friend who was working at a radio station, and I called him up and said, I need a job. And he goes, you've always had a good voice. You should come, and I'll see if I can get you an audition. Well, next thing you know, I was doing radio news in Detroit, and for 5 years, I was on air in Detroit radio. And so
As a high schooler.
as a high schooler, yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that so much.
So that, I guess in the context of this discussion,
Right.
so far it's been a monologue, but
No,
thanks
no.
for listening.
No, I love this so
In the
much.
context of this discussion, Natalie, the story there really is you don't know what your destiny is. Life is a journey, and you just kind of take it a day at a time, and everything that is your life informs kind of what happens next. And, things happen for a reason. I'm a big believer in fate and destiny and luck, okay? And luck is the definition where preparedness meets opportunity. And when those two things cross, you find luck. And so your goal is to always be prepared, keep learning more, keep doing more, and so forth, but keep constantly being on the lookout for where Lady Luck is going to present herself, networking and, constantly reassessing your career and what you think you want to do and go after it. And so, my trajectory could never have been prescribed. I could never have
Sure.
imagined that this is how my life would unfold, or the events that would take me from, a meager blue-collar kind of existence into what would become a career in radio that then led to time in television, broadcast television, then cable satellite programming. I ended up being in New York for 3 years at the time that HBO, CNN, and MTV were launching, and
Oh
I was
my
part of the
gosh.
teams that created all of those stations. I was a market research analyst.
I knew nothing about this, Fred.
Well, we did.
I love this.
We need more time to hang out.
We do.
Yeah, so then I ended up in the world of cable television and cable satellite programming just because it was the right moment.
Wow.
And that eventually led me to the real mainstay of my primary career, which ended up being in video games. And that's where I, did the best and was able to really, contribute in building and helping to grow companies and became what I would call, moderately successful.
That's great, Fred. So
So now
you.
what? Where do we go from here?
Okay, so from here, I love all of this so much. I do have a question, and that is, when you were a young boy, did you have aspirations or dreams of what you wanted to be when you grow up?
No.
You just had your head down.
I just wanted to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, when, again, and that's not unlike, the existence of many children and young people everywhere, where, times are not good for a lot of people,
Right.
even in our country today, where, I mean, we live in the most affluent country on the face of the earth, the beacon of democracy and freedom and all the things that the whole world always looks up to. And we're spending all this negative time and energy trying to destroy ourselves, very publicly.
Yeah.
And so many people are getting caught in the middle of this insanity.
Yeah.
And it's spreading to other parts of the world because everybody goes, well, if that's what
If
they're
that's what
doing in
they're doing.
America, I guess we got to do that. And it's like,
Yeah. We're
no,
like the
no,
spoiled
don't
child
do this.
acting out.
We're going back to that democracy thing. We're trying to figure things out. We don't know,
Right.
we thought we knew all the answers. We really don't, because it's, democracy is kind of a set of loose rules, and it requires civil society, and it requires, people engaging respectfully and thoughtfully with each other, and celebrating their differences and so forth. And so to be, I guess again, some of the topic and the point of this interview and
Right.
this show that you have, for the young people growing up today that are, the Gen Z
Right.
group, which is kind of teenagers and people in their early 20s. And in some of my businesses, I own retail businesses, and that is the predominant employee group that we have with
Right.
us. They're Gen Z people. And so we have an opportunity to be very close to a lot of their lives and their thoughts and their anxieties.
Hmm.
And it's a very, very complicated and difficult time. And as you throw something like the pandemic into the middle of this whole thing, right? When they were going to college and, just heading to high school, and we're in middle school, and the world shuts down, and the world as they knew it and all their
Hmm.
peers and everything got dispersed, and went into lockdown. I mean, nothing like this has happened, in the world in 100 years.
Right.
We didn't have a playbook for this.
Right.
Everybody's
At
going,
all.
well, it'll be over tomorrow. No, it won't. It'll be over next month. No, it won't. It's like,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so many people, so many, individuals, businesses, families, everything really went through a massive change during that couple of year period. And we're still coming out of it. We all have PTSD as a result. You can't go through that and not have it.
It's true.
And so, the young people of today, I really feel for their anxiety. And as a technologist, it's hard for me to admit this, but, all the time we spend with our screens, is not necessarily helpful to maintaining genuine and authentic communication and relationships with other people.
Right.
As humans, our DNA and our brains
Connect.
are wired to be a grouping species and to have real relationships and meaningful conversations with each other. And when I look at our dear young population today, digital natives.
Tech
I mean, yeah, they're sitting beside each other just like this, but not
Right.
talking. They're texting each
Right.
other, instead of talking. And I go, put that down and speak
Yes.
with your voice.
Right. Right.
It's just, it's just an odd construct that I don't think, sadly, is very healthy and will pay good dividends down the road in terms of their ability to develop true
Social skills.
exactly,
Yeah.
social skills, business skills, peer relations, working with managers and becoming managers. I mean, that stuff requires real time, real human engagement. It's not done via email or through social media.
So how do we ameliorate this? How do we fix it? How do we address it?
It's hard because, again, the current Gen Z population that has now come into the workforce are digital natives. And so this is what they know and what they grew up with. And, frankly, it was their parents, the millennials,
Right.
the generation before them, that, and going all the way back to even my generation, the boomers, who did not necessarily like my generation was so career focused. I didn't spend as much time at home or with my kids as I wish I did, and because I was traveling all the time, building
Okay.
my career and working around the world
Providing. Yeah.
in the entertainment and technology industries. Um, and, since that time, uh, parents have been, usually dual career households, and they've been very, very busy. And so the way we now raise our kids is we hand them a iPad and a phone and say, occupy yourself.
Right.
And we think we're parenting because we have a device, a restriction device on there, so we can
Right.
at least make sure they're only watching like cartoons and
Age
G-rated games.
appropriate.
Yeah, exactly, but that's, like, not parenting. You
Right.
gotta, like, take your kid to the playground and push them on the swing set and take them for a walk in the park and, do those kinds of old-fashioned things without the
Mhm.
technology to really build those kind of relationships. So there's a lot of, causes and guilt factors that have built up over the last kinda 20 to 30, 40 years,
Sure.
um, that there's no easy way to undo that stuff, but it starts with recognizing that this is just not good, normal, healthy human existence
Yeah.
and starting to try to put some curbs around that. It's just like, if you wanna lose weight, you gotta, like, diet and
Reel it in.
exercise. You gotta,
Yeah.
you wanna get smarter, you gotta, like, go take some classes,
Read a book.
learn something. So
Yeah.
you have to discipline yourself to doing something different. And that's very difficult to do because, I mean, just like any addiction, um, you know, you can be addicted to technology.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
and
There's now rehabs for it.
well, yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
in countries like Korea, where I worked for 6 years as part of my, not continually there, but one of the
Sure.
companies I was a part of was, Korean headquartered, and I spent a lot of time there. Um, they were having such huge problems when online gaming emerged, and persistent worlds, so that, it was not something you did asynchronously on your own time and other people, and then you kinda uploaded your characters and things happened.
Okay.
This is your
So not like
online.
Sims or yes, like
Well, it's
Sims.
it's it's not a specific, game.
Game.
It's with online gaming, synchronous play became possible, which is something we always had
Can you
strived
explain that
for.
to
Yeah,
me?
yeah, had always strived for, but were never able to accomplish until the internet made that possible. So through the internet, it means you can play live with other people
Okay.
at the same time.
Right.
And so then the scale suddenly started getting developed, and where you have like thousands of players, tens of thousands of players, hundreds of thousands of players online together in a persistent world, meaning this world goes on 24/7. And so people were literally becoming addicted. And in Korea, this was during the early 2000s, so about 20 years ago, um, you know, young people were so into this, so addicted, they like quit going to school, they quit going to work, and they were starting to commit suicide. They stopped
Oh,
eating. I mean, it became a hugely problematic thing, and the Korean government just
shut it
put
down.
huge restrictions around all of this in terms of how many hours people could play,
Oh my
you know,
goodness.
to try to intervene because they could
Yeah.
see this was really
Out of
hijacking
control.
society. Yeah. So, excuse me. So we've been kind of swimming in those waters for a long time now, and it used to be just, video games were the unhealthy, evil thing, um, and again, I go back with video games to 64K, actually 48K programs that were on a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk
Right.
with Commodore program on one side and Atari program on the other side, and have been with it all the way through the CD era and
From the very beginning.
from very early on. Yeah, yeah. I was not a computer guy. I just ended up in a computer world because I answered an ad for an entertainment company was looking for a marketing guy, and I go, okay, cool. And so it turned out to be a game company. I'm going, well, I don't know anything about games. I barely know how to use a computer, but it sounds interesting, and the people were amazing. And so I pivoted my career out of media, out of broadcasting, and cable, and
It's
into
like
games.
adjacent. It feels
Oh,
adjacent.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was another form of entertainment in
Sure.
its nascent days, though.
Okay.
Um, but it became and still is massive, right? I mean, it is now the dominant form of entertainment in terms of hours spent and money made. I
I
mean,
didn't
the
realize that.
video game industry globally is the biggest entertainment industry. It's bigger than television, radio, and everything else combined. It's huge and just continues to grow.
I
And
had
so
no idea.
so that's like the gaming piece, but out of that, when, Facebook launched and the early days of social media there in the, around 2008, 2009, um, social media took on a whole other form because gaming wasn't for everybody, you know?
Sure.
A lot
You
of
had to,
people
like,
look
have the console and
well, either console ours were always PC games, so
okay.
so we never made console games ourselves. With my companies, we were a PC-based company. Um, so the games were actually bigger, more complicated in the PC world because you could do more with more powerful computers than
Okay.
with consoles. So they were much more limited development and play environment. Uh,
Can you share what the games were?
what my game?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I got a whole wall of games in a PowerPoint that I sometimes use and things. Um, so I launched, for I think probably about 40 games during my career, and they go back to games like Civilization, which is a world building game, strategy game by a Hall of Fame game designer named Sid Meier, with a company called MicroProse Software, and I joined them when they were very small and were kind of stuck with about 15 people, and we built that to be a global company, took it public, which we never should have done. We were not suitable to be a public company because we could never predict when the next game was going to be done. So,
Right.
so we went public really well, and then we crashed really fast and merged with another game company, and it was a big mess. Um,
All lessons that you've learned
Oh,
through
yeah.
just
Survival, you know? So that was a game company of strategy games and simulations, so we also did the earliest simulations of how to fly jet fighter planes and, helicopters, and they were military simulations because one of the co-founders, was a ex, Air Force, fighter pilot, and
oh,
so we had access to a lot of military personnel and information, and so we made computer games out of those things where you could, simulate being a F-15 fighter pilot and go fly campaigns over Libya at that time when we were bombing Tripoli, Always gotta have somebody to bomb.
always.
Um, yeah, and then what brought me to Austin was a company called Origin Systems. I met them because when I set up our European operations for MicroProse, I was looking for other U.S. companies to bring that were not directly competitive with our products, and I came across Origin Systems out of Austin that was making fantasy role-play games,
Okay.
and so I ended up bringing the Ultima series of games, which is fantasy role-play set in medieval Britannia, with a guy named Lord British as the overlord. He was the designer, the creator, still is. I shouldn't say was, like he's not around. His name's Richard Garriott, so
Yes.
he's a Hall of
Okay.
Fame video game designer, and as I say, he's the first second-generation British-American cosmonaut astronaut. So in addition to being a game designer,
He's an astronaut.
he's a bona fide trained in the Soviet Union for a year at Star City, became a cosmonaut, but then because he was traveling with U.S. astronauts to the International Space Station, where he spent 11 days, he had to also train as an astronaut. So he's a fully certified cosmonaut and astronaut.
Like the only one on Earth.
Well, one of few,
One
let's
of
just
very
say.
few.
But he's
Wow.
one of those lucky people that has been off the planet and spent 11 days on the international
That
uh,
is
um,
remarkable. Space
space
station.
station, and because he's also a creative guy. In addition to doing some scientific experiments up there, he also did the first ever juggling competition in space between the cosmonauts and the astronauts on the space station. So they juggled in weightlessness, which is a
That's
really cool thing.
so cool.
And Richard brought a bunch of artwork from young people, from students in the U.S. and
Oh,
in the
wow.
U.K. about outer space and science fiction and stuff. And so he also set up the first ever art exhibit on the
On
International
space.
Space Station. So he hung up all around the space station these young people's works of art. And then the coolest thing is he also smuggled in his spacesuit, this was not on the official manifest, a small camera and brought up a personal camera that could record like 5 minutes of video. And so he recorded the first ever science fiction movie made in space about Earth invading space, reversed the whole alien narrative. And
That is so
it took us like 2
cool.
years to get it cleared through NASA and the Soviet Space Agency.
Where can
Um,
that be watched?
well, it actually debuted as a short at South by Southwest in
Oh,
10 or 11 or something like
okay.
that. Richard went up in 2008, and a movie was made on his whole adventure, which is worth watching. It's on Netflix and Amazon and everything else. It's called Richard Garriott, Man on a Mission.
Okay.
And it's a beautifully done, it's a small crew, just like 2-3 person crew from Austin. I think they were called Beef and Pie Productions. And they filmed him in the whole, astronaut training in the Soviet Union and his whole blast off, his return to Earth. And then all the music was done here in Austin too. So it's
Oh,
a great
cool.
movie.
Yeah, I
Worth
definitely want
worth
to check
watching,
that out.
especially if you're a space enthusiast.
Space or music or just film enthusiasts,
So anyway,
or
we've
gaming.
gone way off into the weeds there somewhere on not just my career and what I know, but
People,
interesting people that I've
yeah,
had the privilege of working with.
working alongside. Would you say that Richard Garriott is one of your mentors or
No, but he's a very dear friend. His brother Robert was actually more of what I would call a mentor,
okay.
because Robert hired me in the company to be part of his business team. The company was kind of split at that time. Robert was running business out of New England, and Richard and the creative team mutinied because they said it was too cold and unfriendly up in New England. And Richard had gone to school at UT, University of Texas, for a couple of years, and said, I want to go back to Austin. It's much cooler, nicer. The girls are prettier and friendlier, and it's just a cooler scene. And so the creative team literally up and split.
Wow.
And Robert was kind of alone up there in New England, and so he and I got to know each other when I brought Origin products to Europe. And he persuaded me after MicroProse went public to join their team and help them grow, because they were kind of another such story, small, mildly successful, but very ambitious and wanted to go farther. So I joined them as head of sales and marketing and PR and all that kind of stuff. And we grew the company, phenomenally over like 5-6 years, and we ended up merging with Electronic Arts.
Yay.
Yeah, which is I don't know if it still is the largest, but for so long and at that time, they were the largest independent third-party video game not
Distributor.
distributor, publisher in the
Okay.
world. So they didn't just carry the games; they made their own games, and then they had affiliated studios that they worked with and distributed their products into the channel. We were the second acquisition of EA.
Oh
And so I
my
ended up
word.
becoming a vice president with Electronic Arts for a few years till I said, I've I don't like board meetings. All the bureaucracy. I don't want to be in San Francisco every few weeks. I'm going to go back and be an entrepreneur. And so I just, my whole life has been about pivoting back to doing creative and interesting things
Mhm.
that I don't over engineer or try to overthink what that next thing should be. I just like to have myself at a certain point. I know when kind of my work is done or my best work is kind of behind me,
Sure.
whether it's with a company or in a project or in an environment, and I move on to open myself up to something else that can come along again. So at that point, I've perfected my skills and my capabilities, um, and am waiting and looking for that next opportunity to intersect so that I can like hop on another train and go in the other direction.
I feel like we should call it like the Fred Schmidt method.
Yeah, well,
That's great.
it's yeah, I don't know if it's a method, but it's, because I never really had, we were talking before we went live here about mentorship and
Mhm.
where that comes from, and, I've always been open to it, but I've just never had the opportunity except with, close colleagues and peers, and like I
Mhm.
say, Robert Garriott, and during our origin period, he and I worked very, very closely together. He's somebody I learned a lot from, had huge respect for, still do. He's a wonderful human being, as a businessman and with great ethics,
Mhm.
super fair and thoughtful and, really sweated the hard problems of, how we should move forward. I was like kind of the engine that took us forward, but he was the guy that kind of pointed us like where we should go and made sure we didn't run out of money and we're making good business decisions.
Okay.
But again, he was basically a peer, not just somebody on the outside or somebody I would meet periodically or whatever. And so I've always had the privilege in my life because I try to put myself into places where I'm working with people where we have a lot of chemistry,
Mhm.
That's just so important. I
It
never
is.
wanna work with people who I don't respect,
Right.
or who are, careless and reckless
Or
and
lack integrity
yeah,
and
and
ethics.
disrespectful of
Right.
employees and peers and, living, chasing ego and greed kinds of missions as opposed to, taking care of business, putting one foot in front of the other, and bringing everybody along on the journey with you. So those places are out there. Those people are out there, both in startup worlds and, as companies get bigger and become more corporate and the money seeps in and then
Mhm.
power starts to find its way in there. I mean, we're right now living in that very dystopian era again where we've got, billionaires going on trillionaires. I mean, Elon Musk's latest pay package negotiated with Tesla is $1 trillion pay package.
Stop.
Trillion. The board has approved
Approved
this,
it.
okay? And he has some, substantial metrics he has to meet over a 10-year period, which he may or may not meet. But I mean, really? I
Who
mean,
needs that kind of money?
that is that is, I mean, he already has more than the GDP wealth of most nations on the face of the earth. You know, I love the fact that he used to be a genius. He somehow has become a politician and gotten
Right.
way off
Right.
track into the weeds. But, love and respect the fact that he's a multitasking genius in many different fields all at the
Mhm.
same time. That's pretty cool and amazing. But, you know, what's he doing to really help move the needle on society and making the world a better place? And I would say not much.
Right.
I mean, his products in some cases speak for themselves, and they have been good.
Mhm.
He's certainly done an amazing job of re-engineering space for a guy who didn't come from a space technology background or
Right.
even building cars. I mean, he's reinvented several massively complicated and hard industries with obviously brilliant people he's surrounded himself with, and could buy, I mean, could afford with,
Right, right.
with the money he had both and the connection into the investor world that he grew up with in San Francisco from
Mhm.
what we call the PayPal mafia.
Okay.
Those guys have all
Like the
co-invested in everything, you know, for the last 20 years. They all like, they're behind everything.
right.
And but I mean, we're at a really bizarre inflection point, I think, in our Western modern society and civilization in terms of how much money do we really have to quest for?
Mhm.
And before it's like enough. And you just say, I need to do something with this. I mean, where's the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gateses of the world that actually have pledged, to give away like 99% of their wealth in their lifetime,
Right.
to underwrite, research and science and medicine and poverty. And, the world has a long, long list of problems that need addressing. And then you got these other, what I sadly have to call wahoos because
Megalomaniacs.
you lose respect for them at a certain point,
Right.
that they have so much money that they could be doing so many amazing, wonderful, good things with, and all they're doing is chasing even more money,
And fighting.
well, yeah, and so back to the times that the Generation Z young people find themselves in today, there's a lot of really mixed signals about what they should be aspiring to with their lives.
Yeah.
Not a lot of good role models for them to look up to, and not a lot of good guidance on what should be a happy, fulfilling, you know, and meaningful life.
So where do they turn?
You know, It's hard. I mean, hopefully you got some family, but so many families are so hugely dysfunctional
Mm-hmm.
because of just things of the last 50 years and the way we've chosen to lead our, privileged first world Western existence. We've done this to ourselves.
Right.
Nobody's done this to us.
Right.
We have the freedom and the means in many cases, not all. I mean, we have a lot of poverty in our country
Yeah.
that we should have been able to erase decades ago. There should be nobody poor in this country. The Nordic region and New Zealand and other places, they have much smaller populations, but similar kind of per capita wealth.
Okay.
And they've been able to basically eradicate poverty. And so the only poor people are people who really just want to be poor. I just leave me alone. I
Yeah.
want to do this.
I got
It's
this.
like, okay, just don't hurt yourself or anybody else. It's okay, you know. And we are such a privileged society here. We have the ability to get rid of those problems and just solve them literally by writing a check and
Right.
putting, the social nets and all the things in place to just eradicate poverty and really help lift up the bottom, 20% of our society here. And so, people in some cases can turn to their families. In some cases, they can turn to their churches, which are a good source of inspiration. But there's a lot of complications in the religious world these
true.
days too, as religion has found its way into politics, and those two things have kind of combined to be rather combustible
Right.
at
Right.
times. The churches that really focus on community and people and
Mhm.
togetherness are the ones that can offer something to young people. The ones that just say, you know do as I say, not as
Not
I
as I
do,
do.
then, maybe you ought to question that one,
Yeah.
and what you're gonna learn out of it and get out of it. And then the rest is, out of people that you meet. And so but that goes back to you gotta get off your screen. You gotta
Mhm.
get out of your house. You've got to be able to get out there and meet people and interact, whether that means taking classes, formal or informal. I mean, in, community college, or continue to learn, sharpen your skills, learn new skills. You don't have to get a degree. I mean,
I'm glad you said that because I do want to know. I don't know. Did you go to college?
oh yeah, I've got a bachelor's degree.
Where did you
Like
go?
Wayne State University in
Okay.
Detroit, night school, because
Wow.
I was
You were
working full
working.
time by day, and so I put myself through night school. I was working 60 hours a week, and I went between school classes and homework. That was another 40 hours. So that's where I said, when I was a teenager, I learned what it was like to work 100 hours a week, and so I've always been that way. I'm 100 hour. I mean, I got up this morning at 4 o'clock, because
I
I'm doing stuff at 4 a.m. I'm on
Yeah.
calls with Europe and doing things and writing. That's, my best hours are in the morning when I'm fresh and clear headed, and so you can really push yourself, and you're not going to die in most cases from working or pushing yourself too
Too
hard.
hard.
And in fact, what it does is really sucks up that unproductive free time that gives you
The doom scrolling
well,
time.
for that, and also other more nefarious things like drugs and
Partying.
alcohol
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
mean, things that may be fun for a moment
A
or two. I mean,
season.
I love a good pop every once in a while too,
Totally.
but they end up not well
Right.
as your end result. And so if you fill up most of your waking hours with productive things that you're learning from, or that inspire you or motivate you, or you can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong with that formula. It's self-actualizing, and that's nothing you wait to get to a certain stage of your life. You can create your own self-actualization by just being curious, being adventurous, saying, I wonder what that is. I wonder how that works. I wonder who those people are, and just got to put yourself out there and go chase it. But yeah, you can Google a lot of this stuff, and AI now makes it really easy for you. It's like, yeah, but that's not helping you learn it the way that really you will retain, and that will inform your character and your intellect and your spirit as a human being.
So what is that way of learning rather than on the phone?
I'm just saying experiencing
it.
it, being in the moment.
Right.
It's a little slower, okay? And nothing wrong with the knowledge you can now instantly get at your fingertips, from your digital device. But you then have to put that aside and actually apply this. What does this mean?
Right.
Okay, now I've read it. I think I sort of understand it, but until you actually see it in practice, engage with it, put yourself in the middle of it, you really don't have an understanding of what it is. I mean, I've been to the dentist like you have enough times. I kind of know what they do with them drills and all that kind of stuff in there, but that doesn't mean I'm a dentist. I kind of know how it works. Give me one of those things.
Yeah.
And, I don't think you want me playing around in your teeth
No.
there, So you really have to, take the time to properly learn skills and talents and so forth. And over time, it all pays off. I mean, throughout my whole life, Natalie, even when I'm working in computer games, I've always done radio or voiceover work, or we did commercials sometimes that I would do our own commercials because I love to, and we save some money in my budget, and so I said I'll just do that spot.
Did you voice any of the characters?
No, I never did characters. I'm an announcer.
Neutral American speaker.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I sound like Dan Rather.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't do characters at all, but I'm just saying I continue and always have picked things from throughout my career. Like back when I was in the Teamsters, because I was in shipping and receiving, and I drove a forklift, a high-low, which, by the way, I called my first communications job. Okay, in a factory. And you know why?
Why?
Because everybody else in this big factory in Detroit was hardwired to a position, like on the line. So your job is to stand here and put these screws on this part and turn them this way, and then the line would bring the next part, and this is your job. Everybody was stationary and hardwired. When you have a forklift and you got to pick things up and deliver them, I was constantly mobile, and I was able to move around. So people would be going, hey, take this note and pass it to Joe over there in spot welding because I want to meet him for lunch. And, next thing you know, people are going, here's $10 for a dime bag of pot. And, that Larry over there has got the pot today.
Yeah.
So, I just became the guy who could move around.
Communications.
But so I call that my communications job because, I was able to do that.
I love it.
But, out of that experience, Natalie, I know how to drive a forklift. So my favorite thing is when I'm in some environment with suits and, important people, and there happens to be a forklift sitting there, I jump in the seat of a forklift and drive it. And they're all going, what are you doing? How do you know how to drive a forklift? There's a story to everything,
Sit back, I'll tell you.
So I'm just saying, all of the things.
Get your hands dirty.
Well, but all of the things that you learn throughout your entire life, every experience will continue to inform who you are as a person throughout the whole life that you have. And may it be long and fortunate as I have been able to be too, to have a lot of experiences, And so I'm never bored because I know how to do a lot of different things.
Right.
And I enjoy working on my own cars, and, I ride motorcycles, and, so I mean, the more things you engage with, besides just your screen, you actually learn things that are useful and fun and interesting and fulfill you in a more total way as a human being than just getting information in a two-dimensional way, you know?
I love that, Fred. What would you say to people that are riddled with fear, the Gen Z that is like, I earlier you mentioned you have a heart for their anxieties.
Yeah,
And
anxiety is a word that I see all the time.
okay.
But, you know, at moments like these, it's very quickly moving from just understandable anxiety into true fear, because we are now in this very unusual moment we could not have completely predicted. Um, and it's unfolding faster and weirder than we could have imagined. But, you know, we as a society are losing so many rights that have been fought for the last 5, 6 decades, you know? People are just losing rights. I mean, you know, votes are being gerrymandered, you know, women are being discriminated against, and their ability to decide what to do with their bodies is being taken away and challenged, and, you know, anyone who has any, you know, issues with their gender or
Right.
sexual orientations, it's like, oh, you know, if you're not fitting this increasingly smaller box, you know, your fear is now turning, or your anxiety is turning into understandable and legitimate fear, because there's actions being taken in society. I know I'm sounding real woke, you know,
No,
come
no.
get me. I'm an immigrant, ICE, you know, but I do have a citizenship paper. So,
Yeah, don't mess
so
with
there.
Fred.
You know, we got to keep speaking out. We
Okay.
got to, and do not let fear dominate you ever, not ever. Don't ever go there. Don't let anybody ever do that to you. There's nothing to fear except fear itself. Somebody said that somewhere in history, Teddy Roosevelt or somebody. Um, you've got to keep moving forward, figuring out what's right and wrong, and find that good, you know, I don't call it moral compass, because moral gets us back into religion and what people tell you is moral or not moral. I call it ethical. I mean,
Okay.
what's just between human beings? What are ethical things that just, come on,
Live with principle.
yes, makes sense. And, you know, the old adages like treat people the way you want to be treated, you know,
Right.
be kind. Guess what? Love is not a woke thing. Love is a good
Love.
thing. And
Yeah.
supposedly it's supposed to be behind everything, but somehow gets lost all the time in favor of, you know, fear and violence and anger and all that kind of stuff. And we just have to be careful. And unfortunately, the more time you spend with that screen, the more it gets amplified, because again, the algorithms, which, you know, are amplified and programmed for clicks and eyeballs, okay? That's how the advertising works, and that's how the monetization of technology works, is through people engaging. And so the
Right.
more you engage, the more it feeds the algorithms to feed you stuff that gets more engagement, you know? That's called clickbait, right?
Right.
And ultimately, it starts with a news headline or something else and ends up becoming an advertisement or some kind of a message that's trying to take you down some road you were not expecting to go. And so the more you can like do that in measured doses, like everything in life, the healthier you're going to be, to just put that stuff down and re-engage with people. You know, when you meet somebody, the first thing you ask them is not like, what political party are you? Or, you know, what religion are you? Or,
Right.
you know, I mean, what do you believe about XYZ? I mean, you start by just like talking as people, like,
Right.
hi,
Connecting.
what do you do for fun? You know, who are you? Tell me your story. I mean, just reconnect, because that's the beauty of
And
humanity and
being
language.
curious.
We can, like, talk. We speak the same language. But actually, sometimes it's even better if you don't speak the same language,
Right.
you
Because
know? If
then
you're
you can explore.
I've been in, you know, deepest places in Africa and so forth with absolutely no ability to linguistically communicate, but we do it through, you know, hand gestures and laughing and drawing pictures and that kind of stuff, and it becomes really simple but effective. And what you're doing is building trust, okay? Building trust with other people, building authenticity, and you know, and a desire to like and be liked, you know? And we got to get back to those kinds of things, or it's going to be hopeless
The basics.
if we're letting, you know, technology and media and the kind of the news of the day drive our state of mental well-being.
Right, right. There's so many great pieces of advice through here, Fred, and we're coming to a close, but I want to know, are you offering mentorship to people still? And
Not too much,
not too
unfortunately. I mean,
much.
here it is. It's worth exactly what you're paying for,
Yes, yeah.
folks. But maybe there's a nugget or two out of here that's,
Yeah. Oh,
could be
there's so
useful to
much.
you. No, I mean, I do mentor people, but it's within kind of a narrow world that follows the projects that I work on.
Right.
And so a lot of the work that I've done for the last 10 years, as you know, has been between Austin and London, England, between Texas and the UK, and building relationships. And so I've spent a lot of time and energy building, a network between these two
You're
places.
responsible for creating forging the relationship between Hackney and Austin as sister cities. Is that
Right.
correct?
Well, I didn't start it, but I ended up running it.
That's so
It
great.
started between our mayor at that time, Lee Leffingwell, and the mayor of Hackney at that time, Jules Pipe. And they signed a Friendship Cities agreement. And I was just a, innocent CEO of a tech company at that time, and one of my video game companies. And I was at this signing ceremony, and we were all in London. And, my colleagues and I picked up this piece of paper when they signed it and go, like, what is this? This wasn't even on our agenda. What do you do with this?
Yeah.
And they looked, and we said, who's going to do this stuff? And they looked at each other, looked at us, looked at each other, and said, you are. And with that, I got kind of appointed the ambassador to London from Austin, and did that for 12 years. And the greatest achievement, which again, you asked me about this, and I hopefully told you correctly,
You
that
did.
I did not bring South by Southwest to London, but the work that we did for 12 years and the constant nagging of our very good friends at South by Southwest helped inform them when the time came that they might want to consider doing a South by Southwest in London. And so that just happened in June of this year, a few months ago. I was privileged to be there for that inaugural South by Southwest, got to speak and tell the story
You were
of
the
Austin and
third
London.
speaker.
I was in the chronology there.
Who were your opening acts?
It was Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, and then Deepak Chopra, and
Warmed up the crowd.
well, yeah, but Deepak, I don't know if you've ever heard him talk.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't warm up anything. He puts you into a trance.
Right.
He speaks like this and talks about the billions and billions of stars in the universe. And so I'm getting ready to, I'm like,
You're like hyping
trying to build
up.
up my energy because I'm going next, that I've got to be exciting and talk
Yeah.
all about it. I'm just like in my chair going, beautiful stuff. He's
Yeah,
an amazing
yeah,
guy. But I mean, I was just like, I had to go find some major coffee in a hurry in about 10 minutes,
That's great.
to get my mojo going again.
Right, right.
So anyway, that was a lot of fun.
I love that. Can you explain, you were knighted?
No, that's several pay grades higher.
Okay.
But it's in that order of
World.
affairs. Okay, so the British royal family has, for thousands of years, this thing of which knighthood is like at the very top of the heap. It's like a PhD. Okay. But it starts with it being a member of the British Empire, an MBE.
Okay.
And then above MBE, there's OBE, where you're an officer of the British Empire. And then a CBE, where you're a commander of the British Empire. And so they have this whole ranking system. And yes, for not being British, and, just doing the work that I've done between Austin and London in 2017, I was recognized by the Queen of England and made a member of the British Empire for the work that I had done. And it's like, I'm Polish. And I'm an entrepreneur. And because they don't have a category for being a member of the British Empire for services to Austin and London.
Right.
What it actually says on my certificate that goes with the medal that I received and all the other things, it says for services to UK-USA relations. It's like, Whoa.
Whoa.
Now that really puts the burden up to several more large notches, so I was thinking of like, okay, I think I've done that long enough, but I had to sign back up for another, whatever has been 7 more years of working
Oh,
on behalf
Lord.
of, because I had to earn into that
Sure.
kind of recognition and that award. But it's been a real privilege, a real honor, and a lot of fun. And so,
Well, before we wrap, I want to just touch on a couple of things. There's two of my favorite pieces of your identity, which are the companies you own locally here in Austin, which include Wild About Music,
yep.
Austin Rocks, and Toy Joy.
And Yummy Joy.
And Yummy Joy.
Yummy Joy.
Oh,
It spun out of Toy
yes.
Joy. And
Oh, that's so great. So, are you actively working in those?
no, well,
day-to-day, or-
I am. I mean, my wife and I, Shelley, who we're still on the board and so forth. But we've actually, since the pandemic, we used the opportunity to open up our company formally and bring our younger partners in that we've been developing and have been with us for a decade, and bring them formally into the company on the cap table, make them owners formally. And so we've been, for the last several years, turning over the day-to-day operations and the growth plans to the next generation, the younger team. So we're still on the board, and we still
Sure.
advise, and we do lots of personnel counseling and strategy and other kinds of stuff. I still handle a lot of the legal stuff and that kind of thing. But no, it's, like everything, you have to have a succession plan.
Sure.
Because if you don't, that's how we've lost so many businesses in Austin. Is so many amazing founders have worked really hard for decades, but never really found a team to put together around them. And so, after 30, 40 years of going, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. This is hard work and I don't know what to do next.
Right.
And so it's really important, if you have aspirations, any of you there, to start your own business, to recognize that you don't own a business owns you.
Mm,
There's, when you're the owner of your business, you can't quit. There's nowhere to go.
right.
It's your business. You have to show up. So, succession planning, building a team, super, super important to longevity of a business and being able to transition that business. So we're fortunate in that we've got a great group of people. And so our businesses, they've been around now, 30, in some cases, 30 and 38 years. So it's a long time.
That's amazing.
But we're still like growing new ones. We haven't announced it yet, but we're about to launch another concept out of Toy Joy.
Really?
Hopefully, probably in January here. Another creation that's going to spin out of Toy Joy. Excuse me.
No, you're okay. You want to grab some water?
Yeah, good idea for closing remarks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be coming soon. So, the thing that group of companies has, or it's actually a company, but group of concepts has enabled us to do, is to experiment with fun new things that our team, is inspired by. So, they think of things and we validate it in terms of, doing the numbers and trying to figure out where the market is and so forth. And then we just have the ability to launch it ourselves in many cases and grow these various concepts, which then oftentimes become investable. And, then we can then grow, to larger things. So that's where we're heading with some of those businesses over the next few years. We were hoping to already be there, but the economy has gotten a little complicated.
Right,
And
right.
so, on one hand, you've got companies in the tech world that are raising billions of dollars, okay?
For $1 trillion salary.
Well, yes, exactly. And billions of dollars raised at multi-billions of dollars of valuation, and they're like 2 years old, and they haven't even released a product yet.
Right.
You're going, this is like not good, but they're sucking up all the money out of the market to go toward a lot of other businesses that people would like to start and grow. And so, back to mentorship, you were asking what I do, but I work with a lot of startup founders because that's kind of my wheelhouse. I kind of know that stuff. I was with one till midnight last night, a Polish entrepreneur who just brought a business into the U.S., found himself in Texas, in Austin, a capital factory, and they go, you're Polish, you work in tech and media tech. Have you met Fred? No, you got to meet Fred. So I try to hold enough space in my world for people like that I can have a good one-on-one relationship with and kind of help them, from here to there. And that gives me a lot of, gratification to be able to do that. But other than that, I'm not out there on LinkedIn advertising, I want to be your mentor,
right.
Email me today.
I love that, Fred. Well, I can't thank you enough for all of your nuggets of wisdom and insight. And everything that you've shared is like a culmination of you just keeping your head down and going forward and like doing the thing. And no ifs, ands, or buts. And I just love hearing that.
Well, thank you, Natalie.
Yeah.
It's very lovely of you to say that. And
yes.
Weren't we supposed to here's some questions from some millennials, or did we burn up all the time?
I think we burned up the
not
time.
Not millennials. This is the Gen Z. Forget the millennials. They're already over the hill.
Yeah, they're crying in their car. But yeah, I think we covered it.
You think you got all that you need there? Okay.
I do.
Well, thanks again for having me on.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That was Fred Schmidt. My takeaways: prepare relentlessly and then look for luck. Then choose people and integrity over ego and speed, and trade a little scroll time for real-world reps. Skills that you practice stick. Also, if you build something, build a team so it can outlast you. If this episode helped, follow the show, leave a quick review, and share it with someone who needs a nudge to get off the screen and into the room. I'm Natalie Payton Newman. Thanks for listening to Uncharted, Your Sidekick for Life. See you on the next episode, and check out the show notes for more details.